So I just read in the patch notes that this lace hotfix came with a persistent wipe, as they usually do. And I logged in earlier today and had to remake my character, so I'm guessing about half the stuff I upgraded with my ships is gone, along with most of the gear that I sort of collected on the way in all those bunker missions. While I go through and see what the carnage is, I thought I'd take you on a little journey I call, What is the Carnival? So if you're one of the 5 or so people that's been watching my vids and you stay to the end, you've probably seen this animation. If you're guessing that's my org, you're right. The reason for this vid now is that I feel like in the next year or so, this game is going to be turning the corner in the game loops. And much like the improvement in turret gameplay, it seems like Star Citizen is going to be making non-pilot jobs much more interesting and viable in the coming months. In other words, I feel that it's finally time to start recruiting for my org. I might be a little bit behind the big boys on this one, so looking at you, Test. While I'm working on a shorter recruiter vid, working with a couple friends for voice acting and another one that's a musician for the background music on that smaller project that's probably going to run maybe 3 minutes or so, I thought it might be cool to do an actual shallow dive on where the idea for all of this came from. So first I wanted to jump into a little bit of history about myself, and I swear this won't take long and it's relevant to where I came up with this. I've been involved in PvP games for a long time, basically since the early to mid 90s, back when you had to have LAN parties with twisted pairs where you'd actually connect 2 computers directly to each other so that you could both play. And during that long time, I've spent in any number of clans, orgs, squads, factions, and so on. And for whatever reason, I usually ended up leading them just due to turnover, burnout. But their structures, no matter what the name or what they called themselves, was always the same. There was usually a handful or so players at the top that ostensibly ran things, and then depending on the size of the group, a number of lieutenants or kind of supervisors that were immediately below them, and then just kind of a big scrum of everybody else where they just threw everyone into the pool and they just kind of had to follow the lieutenants and the leader's orders. If you were down in that scrum, you didn't really have a lot of say with who you played with or what you did in the org. It was more similar to a military structure, which made some sense since a lot of these were military-style combat games. Think like Delta Force, Joint Operations, Counter-Strike, MechWarrior Online, things like that. If you came into that established environment, your chances of affecting change or having any say in the org or what they did, how they were run, who you dropped with, all of that was largely out of your hands. You were just a cog in the machine. And while that could be fun to a point, a game like Star Citizen is pointed more at individuality and much smaller groups. The game loops are about more than just organized combat, although there's certainly that element. From what I've seen, most people are jumping into this game solo, brand new, without knowing anyone else in the game, or they're jumping in very small groups of 2 to 5 people, sort of tight-knit micro-orgs. The problem with this is that there are some monstrously huge orgs out there, and most of the big ones seem to be leaning towards combat or piracy, or both. So staying solo or in a small org is pretty much guaranteeing that you'll either be spending your game life in safer systems without those big orgs, or you'll be risking being a loot pinata for one of those bigger orgs. Thankfully, there's a reason why they call it space. There's a lot of room for you to hide if you don't want to be found. But on the downside, that's no way to play a game like this. You're going to want to see the sights, you want to engage with other players, you're going to want to engage in other systems, you want to be able to travel freely. So there I was, in an org with a great bunch of people, but it was still very much, we need you to sit in this turret. We have a big org event tonight, so everyone go here and load up this kind of ship, and we're going to do this specific thing at this specific time. And that would be it. That would be like a once a week thing where you just go do the thing that was organized by the org, and that was it. Even with a good org, with great people, if I just wanted to go mine with 3 of my friends, That wasn't really an option. If the org needed me to sit in a turret on a hammerhead for a few hours, that's what I was going to do. The idea of the Carnival grew partially out of that realization and partially out of my two favorite books, A Deepness in the Sky by Werner Vinge and Singularity Sky by Charles Stross. Both great books and both containing the word sky for some reason. Anyways, in both of these stories, they're entities, the Qingho and the Festival, respectively. They're massive spacefaring collectives of loose affiliation. They banded together to travel system to system, were organized within that structure to a point, but also had a fair amount of independence. A lot like a carnival will travel together from city to city, but it's made up of different elements, different attractions, different shows, different tents, all doing their own thing, but moving as a group. This carnival is no different. The goal is to gather up those solo players in those very small orgs, the ones that are 1 to 5 people, maybe up to 10 or so, and bring them into the carnival. Gather together for mutual protection and strength in numbers, and to be able to pull things off that you couldn't pull off with like 5 people. But then the problem became this. People are in those small groups or running solo because they want to retain their individuality, their freedom. They want to run in their small group without having to be told, okay, you have to go sit in the turret on the Idris for 5 hours on Thursday at 9 p.m. When what they really want to do is salvage that ship over there, or go mining with their friend, or haul cargo, or PvP in their arrow. You get the point. So my thought was this. How do you merge the size and overall organization with the desire of these tiny orgs to remain independent, but still be protected under the larger umbrella? How do you get around that good old boys situation where a handful of people have been running an org for years and you, as a newbie, have no say in what's going on?
Now let's you just drop them pants.
Drop?
Just take them right off.
I mean, what's this all about?
Don't say anything, just do it.
Just drop them, boy.
What I settled on was a cellular structure. In a cellular structure, you have a bunch of small groups that can band together for mutual security without losing their individuality or being forced into game loops they don't want to participate in. We travel system to system together, but once in that system, people could break off and do their own thing, basically set up their own tent and go to work. So in a cell, you'd be playing with the people you wanted to play with, doing what you wanted to do. A cell is roughly 3 to 10 people, but there isn't a hard and fast number. It could be 2 prospectors and a whole A, it could be a single mole, it could be a freelancer and their 2 gladius buddies, it could be a single hammerhead, and so on. But there still has to be some structure, right? There has to be a way to communicate to the org at large. There has to be some sort of leadership that decides where to go, when to go, and sends out the alarm if the carnival comes under attack. So organization. Each cell designates a person to represent it to the carnival at large. This person might or might not be the leader of that cell. The cell might not even have a leader. How the cell is run is up to the cell, not the carnival at large. Cells are individual in that sense. But you have this representative from that cell that voices the opinions for that cell to the carnival. Because people are people and things change, if anyone finds themselves in a cell or things go sour, they can move to a different cell. They can also throw themselves into a singles pool until they either find a cell, or they can be something of a nomad within the carnival, tagging along with other cells until they find one they like, or just keep migrating through if that's the gameplay they find interesting. The idea is to have a good bit of freedom within the structure without losing that structure. For the cells, each cell will gather into a group of 5 to 10 cells that we call a supercell. These supercells are made of the individual cell leaders. Again, this supercell then selects one of their number to be representative of the supercell. Like the individual cells, this can be the actual leader of the supercell or just a person that's been designated to carry the message upward through the structure of the carnival. Much like an individual, if a cell doesn't like the supercell they're in or thinks they'd be a better fit with another one, They can move over or go into the solo cell pool, free floaters much like the solo players. They have less say in the carnival at large, but they also have a bit more individuality. That can also come at the cost of some security, but I'll save that for later. Like cells, supercells are organized together into clusters that are made up of around 10 supercells. By now you're probably starting to see the pattern, a clusters made up of supercell leaders who carry forward the wants, needs, and opinions of their supercells to the carnival at large. This cluster then nominates one of their own to represent the views of that cluster. Finally, these cluster leaders, called buskers, are gathered into superclusters of 1 to 10 clusters. One of their number is chosen to be a barker, a representative of an entire supercluster. And this is as far as the leadership goes. Barkers are at the top, just doing the math along with each cell being around 3 to 10 members, and that pattern holding all the way up. A barker might be in charge of voicing the opinions of 80 to over 1,000 people, depending on how big the carnival actually gets, but it can scale with that size. Leadership can change as needed and desired by the cells, supercells, clusters, and superclusters. The goal again is to give a lot of freedom within the structure for people to do what they want without having to lose the security of the big org, and gives them a lot of freedom to select their own leadership to represent their views. To kind of balance out this churn, there is a permanent body in leadership, and these are the ringleaders. I'm one of these, so is Knight 55 and Sinister Puppy. Although our goal isn't to actually run the whole show. The goal is to work with the barkers and move as a team, as a show, as a collective carnival. So the plan is that we'll travel system to system across the verse. Set up shop in a system, see the sites, do the jobs, mine out the resources, find cool things to trade and collect, and then push on to the next system before we overstay our welcome. Part of our safety will come from being true neutral, and I'll get to this.
What are your thoughts on this momentous occasion, your neutralness?
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
The carnival is a gray org, and that's extremely deliberate. I see the carnival as being able to trade and work with anyone. We'll be the org that brokers peace deals and non-aggression pacts between other orgs. We'll be a neutral power. Of course, that means that we'll have to mostly keep our hands clean. That doesn't mean sparkling, just make sure that any crime stats are cleared before checking out of a system, and making sure that our reps aren't poisoned and bar our return to that system. Much like a real carnival, will only survive on our ability to freely enter and leave systems. That's one of the few rules the carnival has as a whole. Don't poison the well we all drink from. We're primarily an industrial org, but not a focused one. All of the game loops are welcome. Of course, a bunch of industrial players all grouping and traveling together is a juicy target. I'm not naive.
I'm unarmed. Good. I am, of course, wearing full body armor. I am not a moron.
The carnival will need a fair number of PvPers to join up. We're just not going to force people into that game loop if their focus is something else. I myself am a former PvPer, and I'm sure they'll be doing it on occasion. We'll be trading with pirates after all, but the goal is to not be preyed on by them either. And that brings up the other side of the carnival. Here are the ideas to pull on PvPers. These individuals and groups will either protect the carnival as bouncers or hunt down threats to the carnival as the hounds. Like the rest of the carnival, these two groups will be broken up into cells and like, but they may have a more regimented structure as demanded by their nature. Again, that's up to the cells, supercells, clusters, and so on how far they want to take that structure, and how structured and martial they want to be. It's totally possible that the carnival could swallow entire merc orgs in this fashion, and that's fine. They'd just be brought in as a supercell, for example, if they had enough numbers to fill out that structure in the carnival. The carnival is not lacking in big, nasty military ships, even as it stands right now with just 4 or 5 members. And the goal would be to have these running protection for the carnival all the time, but with people who want that job and that duty. Mutual protection is the key to the carnival and the reason to org up in the first place. This is part of the second rule. In order to pay for these non-industrial ships, to keep them in working order, and to give the players on them spending money for their own game loops and upgrades, each cell is expected to pay into the pot around 5% of their profit to keep the hounds and the bouncers in peak shape. And the last wing of the carnival is the clowns. This is the clandestine arm of the carnival, the one that scouts ahead, keeps a watch on the orgs that might be a threat, and generally cause mayhem when we need them to. So that's the broad strokes. That's the general idea. If that sounds fun to you, feel free to join up on Spectrum, where somebody already grabbed Carnival, so we're the SC Carnival. Alternatively, you could join up on the Gilded server. I'll have that link in the description below. We'd absolutely love to have you, and we're rolling into a time when starting to get into an org would make a lot of sense. If you're already in an org and you want to ally up, shoot me a line. Like I said, we're going to be neutral. We're going to have, the goal is to have a lot of friends and not a lot of enemies. So if that sounds good to you there, shoot me a line. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and see me next time.